London's FTSE 100 slipped on Monday with energy and mining stocks leading broad-based declines as investors worried about China's economic outlook amid protests in the country against its strict COVID-19 curbs. The blue-chip FTSE 100 and the more domestically focused FTSE 250 mid-caps shed 0.7% each. Energy stocks fell 1%, while base metal miners and precious metal miners dropped 0.6% and 0.9%. China's zero-COVID policy has already slowed the economy and pressured global growth, but failed to stem the rise in infections. Asia-exposed lenders HSBC and Standard Chartered both fell more than 1%. China's economic activity slumped in November and could drop further in coming weeks as COVID outbreaks spread across the country and protests against tighter virus restrictions escalate. 8 early indicators show a likely contraction in activity in November from an already subdued pace in October, with COVID cases spreading rapidly in each of China's provinces now and major cities like Guangzhou, Beijing, and Zhengzhou imposing new restrictions to limit residents' movements. The outlook remains grim. Economists say chances are rising of more disruption to growth as authorities struggle to minimize COVID infections and deaths while gradually easing restrictions. Demonstrations erupted in cities like Beijing and Shanghai over the weekend as residents vented anger against the virus controls. Emerging Asian bonds have trailed their developing country peers this year, but a turning point looks to be just around the corner. Inflation pressures have begun to ease in many parts of the region, bringing forward predictions for a peak in interest rates. At the same time, positioning from overseas investors is historically light, leaving plenty of scope for inflows to increase. Finally, there's growing optimism over in China into 2023, despite uncertainty over an increase in COVID protests. The OECD says that central banks around the world must be steadfast in their inflation fights, even though economies will suffer as a result. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development boosted its 2023 inflation estimates and said it expects price increases the following year will remain above the targets set by many global central banks. While economies will slow because of tighter monetary policies, the OECD does not foresee a recession. Though a survey of U.S. manufacturers showed a fifth month of shrinking activity, another report indicated a healthy increase in business investment. A survey of the Eurozone businesses indicated that any downturn may not be as severe as initially expected. And finally, Britain's government intends to make £1 billion of public funding available for home insulation projects from early next year, widening access to assistance that was previously only available to poorer households. The government said the proposed scheme would run from early 2023 until March 2026 and would help meet a recent target to reduce energy consumption by 15% by 2030. Britain is currently facing its biggest squeeze on living standards on record, according to government forecasters, driven largely by a surge in energy costs since Russia's invasion of Ukraine pushed up natural gas prices across Europe. Government subsidies for household energy bills are already forecast to cost £25 billion this financial year and £13 billion in the 2023-2024 financial year. When we come back, another story of corruption in Cameroon, and Cameroonians lose $67 million to corruption in 2021. The how and the who is involved after this. The cost of corruption to Cameroon and Cameroonians for 2021 has been put at $67 million, or 42 billion CFA francs. This was an increase of some 25 billion CFA francs from 2020. Cameroon's National Anti-Corruption Commission released a report detailing how much was lost, how it was lost, and who is mainly responsible. A parliamentary group has been gathering testimony on cases of forged signatures, fictitious land titles, bribes to enter prestigious universities, and even extorting money from patients in some public hospitals in order to calculate the financial damage that corruption has caused the country. Corruption has become pervasive and has affected all sectors of the government and civil society, including the executive, judiciary, police, and even the private sector. Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index for 2021 ranked Cameroon 144 out of 180 countries. Joining me again from Yaoundé in Cameroon is Njine Elvis Baneh. He is the National Communication Secretary for the Popular Action Party of Cameroon. Welcome once again to the show. Thank you so much for joining me. When we last had our conversation on Friday, there wasn't a lot of time, but it was necessary to expand this conversation. So let's start with you painting a picture for us of just how pervasive, how deeply entrenched corruption is in Cameroon. As I said earlier on Friday, it's said to be the worst kept secret that Cameroon has, corruption. Take us through this.
Yeah, good morning, madam. And when you talk about painting a picture of how entrenched corruption is in Cameroon, well, as a Cameroonian, honestly speaking, I must regrettably tell you that Cameroon actually seems to be some sort of a breeding ground for corrupt practice or for corruption per se. For decades now, transparency and other institutions have actually made it known, and with evidence, of course, that we Cameroonians are one of the most corrupt nations in the world. And all of this because we have a regime in place that actually, I would say, like I already said on Friday, does not actually seem to have the will to actually fight this evil from the root. That's the problem. We have a regime that keeps announcing measures that are taken to fight corruption. We have a regime that keeps creating institutions, because we have them here in numbers, the institutions that are supposed to fight corruption. But the unfortunate thing is that these institutions do not actually have the power. They are not totally independent. Because I was just following your first guest, for instance, from Malawi, and she said something very important there, that when they investigate someone and they have evidence, then they arrest and they bring you to court so that you explain. But in our context here, when you are investigated, when CONAC investigates, for instance, and has the evidence, what they do is they rather channel the file back to the presidency, and it is the president of the republic who now has the final say to determine whether you are arrested or not. And you now discover that when you give him the file, for some persons, it takes 3, 4, 5, 10 years or even more, and the same people are still in office when CONAC already tabled a file that shows that these people are wanting when it comes to corruption. So what I can simply tell you is that it is a clique of people who are managing the country that have taken the country hostage, and they some sort of rule the country by ambush. Everything that happens is done, is tailored to protect them in power, and whether they steal or not, it is known to them, it is known to the community, it is known to the country. But unfortunately, the regime in place actually doesn't do what it takes to be able to fight the corruption from the roots.
So this report does come from CONAC, as you mentioned, who apparently funnels things back to the president. So let's talk about the National Anti-Corruption Commission. A lot of people would applaud them for coming out with this report and putting a figure, to some extent, to the corruption that's been happening in Cameroon. But does the commission have what it needs? Does it have what it takes to really and truly effectively fight corruption in Cameroon? Or is this just window dressing for what the issues are?
Well, I think I already said it from the first part of my intervention, madam, that CONAC, like other institutions that are supposed to fight corruption, are not totally independent. In other words, they really do not have the total power in their hands to be able to investigate individuals and follow up till the end to see into either these individuals are arrested and judged so that they actually maybe restitute what they stole or not. Because like I say, we have the presidency of the republic, we have the president of the republic, who creates these different institutions, and he is the general overseer of the institution. So the final decision does not come from CONAC, it does not come from ANIF, it does not come from what we call here the Conseil or whatever thing. The final decision goes back to the president of the republic. And so when you table your final report before him with all the evidence, if he decides to keep the file fallow for the next 10 years, know that the individuals that have been investigated and found with evidence against them, they will stay there for the next 10 years till the day he decides. So it's rather unfortunate that CONAC is just a window dressing. CONAC is just some sort of a toothless bulldog. They are playing just what role they can play with the limited powers that they have been given, but they cannot go beyond that level.
So it's reported that about 500 people have been fired from their jobs. Some 37 people have reportedly gone to jail as well. So who are these people? Because with this report, we've heard that the police, local government officials have been implicated as being the worst offenders. There's also health, education, finance, road transport, and territorial administration sectors are reportedly the most corrupt. So Who's going to jail? Who's been fired? Who are the people responsible for the corruption, for the levels of corruption that we're seeing in Cameroon?
Again, ma'am, I will tell you that as a Cameroonian, it's unfortunate that I have to say this on international media, but the truth is that when they tell you that 500 persons perhaps have been fired and some 37 sent to jail, I say those figures are very, very insignificant with respect to what we Cameroonians know is happening on the ground. When we talk about the educational sector, for instance, let me tell you, it is one of the most corrupt, like Konak itself rightly said in his report. I'm not the one saying it. When we talk about territorial administration, these are institutions, these are ministerial departments in the country where practically every competitive entrance exam you write, for instance, in education, there is always some exchange of money in the hands and all whatnot. So all these things, if you want to take the number of persons who go into the practice per year just within one ministerial department, they are in their thousands and not just 37 persons as they will tell you. So those figures to me, I don't know how authentic they can be, but I will tell you that they are too minimal. They are even insignificant when it comes to what obtains on the ground. And I will really regret the fact that with the corruption that keeps growing in our context, that is in Cameroon and perhaps Africa as a whole, we're just talking about Malawi here, I say it is a matter of a mindset. Until we Africans perhaps we get to a point where we will need to change our mindset vis-a-vis our countries and become patriotic citizens and understand that when we are placed somewhere, we are to fight for the growth of the nation, then unfortunately things will not change.
We can put a monetary figure to corruption, but it goes beyond that. So this next question is more of sort of the intangible cost of corruption. What do you think corruption costs Cameroonians? What do you think it costs the country beyond the figure of money we're putting to it?
Well, if we want to keep money aside and look at other consequences of corruption, as far as the country is concerned, first, it tarnishes the image of the country, and by so doing, it prevents other foreign investors who might have had the zeal, the desire to come into the country, because what obtains here is that for you to invest in the country, you must be able to bribe. You must be able to pay some person that you were just talking about Malawi here before perhaps you can have access to certain contracts. We talk about the educational sector. I can tell you, I am an educationist back here in Cameroon. Even the children we teach, many of them are already psychologically corrupt, because you will outrightly hear a child who tells you that if he is placed somewhere, he prefers to steal and go to jail and the family stays behind and benefit. Those are some of the consequences of the so-called administrative tolerance. The regime in place has so much tolerated this evil that it has gotten to a point where even the children who are growing up, who are supposed to be tomorrow's leaders, they now think that it is a norm and that any other person can practice and go scot-free with it. Secondly, it has plunged the country into an untold level of poverty, because at the end of the day, this money circulates within the hands of a few class of persons, and of course, there are children in the country who are talented, who have the potentials to be able to have access into maybe certain professional institutions or offices, but they cannot simply have access to these places because of what? Corruption. They may not have the means to bribe to get to certain offices. So at the end of the day, you realize that some people get offices not because they merit them, but because they have someone somewhere who can place them there, or because they had the means to pay to get there. But those who actually have the potentials, they end up not having access into those offices because they did not have the financial might to be able to do so. Then another thing about another consequence of corruption in Cameroon is just the fact that what? It has generally killed the economy. That is the overall truth about it. It has generally killed the economy in the country, because when we talk about embezzlement in Cameroon, madam, believe you me, it is always in terms of billions. But these are not billions that they embezzle to reinvest in the country. They invest and stock in foreign banks. So at the end of the day, we do not have companies in the country that can employ the youth. We do not have any form of investment. The roads, infrastructure, we do not have them and all whatnot. But then public funds are siphoned and taken out of the country, thereby maintaining the country in an untold state of not only poverty but of underdevelopment.
I'll end with asking you this. After such a damning report that's released, what would you expect to be the next steps, the next line of action to start truly finding a way to move Cameroon away from these corruption issues? What should happen next?
I think the very next thing that could be done is Cameroonians as a people will need to stand up to see whatever means they can use democratically to make sure that the regime in place leaves office, because from every indication, it is not this same regime that can come back to fix the wrongs that they have committed, because the will is first of all not there. Had it been they had the will, then I could advise Mr. Biafra, the head of state, to see into it that he takes people who have that moral rectitude to be able to fight corruption from the base, and he places them in the right offices. Because come to think of it, when you appoint someone into an office, be it a ministry, be it a director in a parastatal or whatsoever thing, and you forget that person there for 10, 15, 20, 30 years, madam, believe you me, such a person can only end up embezzling state funds, because he must have put in place all his maximum best, and with nothing else to offer, he distracts himself with public funds. So there are so many things that could be done, but unfortunately the regime in place lacks the will. So I think I can simply be called on Cameroonian youth and Cameroonians as a whole to get a little more involved in the political lifestyle of their country, go democratically and see how they can vote this regime out of office and bring in some new blood that will be able to at least put in place the measures that it takes to be able to fight corruption. Because I can assure you of one thing, the corruption we are talking about, we know how it is done in our country, and we know exactly from where we can target it to be able to at least reduce it, if not to, let me say, curb it completely, but we can at least reduce it. But the problem is they lack the will.
All right, Njine, Elvis, Baneh, it was a pleasure having you back. It's a conversation we'll continue. If there are further developments, we look forward to talking to you.
Thank you very much.
And the Cameroon's National Anti-Corruption Commission released that report that said corruption in 2021 cost the country $67 million. It's also interesting, of course, to know that this same commission was established by President Paul Biya, who has been running the affairs of Cameroon for 40-something years and has recently said he intends to run for president yet again. You're watching Business Edge. When we come back, Zimbabwe is looking to renegotiate compensation for white farmers who had their lands seized over 20 years ago. The details after this.